So welcome everybody. We have Zhecho on the show with us today. It's a month after his book launch. There it is again. It's looking a bit battered, mate, because you've been doing a lot of interviews. I know over the last month. You've become a very popular figure now. I haven't seen you on the CNN news yet, but maybe you'll get that way soon. I don't know.
I feel a little bit of a celebrity. I have my 15 minutes of share of fame.
15 minutes of fame. There you go.
Appreciate you still being willing to talk to us. Like we got you when you were humble, but you're sticking with the little people, Zhecho, and we appreciate that.
He's got, out of his 15 minutes of fame, he's only got about 15 seconds left. So he's decided to spend that with us. How about that?
Yeah. Yes.
So
it's time to get on an exploitative reality TV show, Zhecho, while you still have a little bit of fame left.
So just a bit of a recap for those people that haven't have not been aware and haven't seen the other 14 minutes of Zhecho's fame. We back in lockdown, Zhecho and I were chatting at the first lockdown and went, what should we do with our time? And Zhecho has worked with Beyond Philosophy now for 13 years. And we've been doing this thing called an emotional signature, which is this research that looks at the value of emotions within an organization. We've got this bloody great big database that we've never really looked at. So Zhecho kindly volunteered.
I think it's fair to say that Zhecho is Beyond Philosophy's data guy.
He's data guy, absolutely. Yes.
Mm-hmm. And I say that with love, Zhecho. I've worked with Zhecho a little bit as I've engaged with Beyond Philosophy, and Zhecho's the guy with the answers.
He is. Absolutely. He is. I'm the guy with the questions. Zhecho comes up with the answers,
which are also important.
Yes. Like, why is man on this planet, and all those type of things.
What's the answer?
Well, the answer is 42. You can read that from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Oh, yes.
Sorry, I interrupted you. So you gave Zhecho this monster of a database and said, do something with this.
Yeah. Could you just go away and look at all this data that we've collected since 2005 on customer emotions and tell me what the key findings are? Anyway, long and short of it is we did an interview with Zhecho on his new book, The Big Miss, about a month ago. We'll obviously put a link to that in the show notes. But we wanted to get Zhecho back on because there's two key things that have been sort of rumbling around my brain. And that is, and we've talked, Ryan, haven't we, about customer science, which is the sort of the interaction between, or the fusion between data, behavioral science, and AI. And there are two bits that I've always found absolutely fascinating, which is, the role of AI in predicting emotions and that whole area. So that's what we're going to talk a bit more about today. Zhecho, how's the book been going? How's are you pleased with the sales and interest and everything?
Yes, it's very good. I see a lot of positive comments on LinkedIn when I share some pieces of the research and some articles. Actually, I have an article about AI, and so in the research that we look at the typical customer journey touch points, and we look at how much value do each of those drive, and where the emotions and customer relationships come in that picture. How much value do those provide? And now I'm actually looking at how is AI used in each of those typical customer journey mapping touch points, so like the customer infinity life cycle, learning about the brand, learning about the product, purchasing experience, all the way to retention.
Great. So there's been a couple of other things that have led us to this, and then I'm going to ask Zhecho to take over. But a couple of interesting podcasts that we've done recently. Again, we'll put a link in the show notes to this. One is around this whole area of customer science. I'm not going to go into that in any great detail today. The second one was we did an interview with one of your colleagues, Ryan, didn't we? Which was talking about how AI is just effectively opinions written in code, and I really love that phrase. Yeah.
So that was Broderick Turner from Virginia Tech.
That's right.
And
Yes.
yeah, he's delightfully skeptical about some AI. So I like that we've had some AI boosters on the podcast to talk about that. I think that's a very important perspective. I also think it's very nice to check in with someone who suggests we tap the brakes a little bit and appreciate this. So yeah, that podcast was fascinating. Broderick's always entertaining to talk to and to listen to.
Yes,
but
absolutely.
This question that go ahead.
No, it's all right. Go on, carry on.
The question that Zhecho was hinting at, though, I think is the third approach. So when thinking about AI, I love talking about what makes it great. I love talking about some of the cautions that we need to think about. The big question, though, is what do we do with this?
Yes.
This is new technology. Everybody agrees it's going to be transformative, even those who are a little skeptical about how and in what way. But then there's also this like clumsy, breathless, panicked, we don't want to get left behind. So let's just like slap this everywhere and hope that some of it works. As opposed to, you saw this, by the way, when, Web 2.0 first came out and there was all this social media. It's like, well, we got to be there. We don't know what it's doing. We got to be there.
Yes.
And so a lot of brands acting in some really clumsy ways and sometimes in detrimental ways.
Yes.
And I'm seeing some of the same impulse around AI. But I think what we'll talk about with Zhecho is there are opportunities to do this intelligently, to solve actual specific problems, to be goal oriented in the way that we approach these things. So I'm excited for this conversation. I think this will be really interesting because as somebody who's not deep into AI, I have those same questions. How do we use this new tool intelligently? What is it good for?
Yeah, and going back to the title of Zhecho's book, that the big miss, the danger is that what people are doing is they're building AI systems and missing the whole fact that customers have emotions, and they're just treating it as if customers are just rational machines that are going to buy things in the same way as they've always done, and they're not. So, Zhecho, perhaps you could start to talk us through the thoughts around this sort of emotion and AI.
Yes. So yes, like you said, I think the danger is that I think to be successful with AI and obviously it needs a lot of data and also the right data. So I'm like with those like AI, yes, you have to start looking into that and could be a lot of could lead to a lot of good results. But obviously you need the right data for it to learn. And here's the thing. Our research that we discussed in the previous podcast and that of many others shows that emotions drive are the main drivers of customer behavior and value to organizations. And so if you don't, I think the danger is like if you're missing some proxies or emotional data, you may not find the real drivers of customer behavior. So I think this is something that people should be cognizant. And Ryan, when you said like people are jumping, like we gotta be there, it reminded me of a story, and that I think is typical of how people approach digital transformation. So we're working with a water utility company, and the guys specifically wanted to test and find that they wanted to be in social media and have channels through Facebook and Twitter and you name it. And they were specifically wanted to ask customers about those channels. When we started talking to customers, we found that basically a lot, and we found that 94% of their contacts came from the through phone and not through social media, right? But when we found what are those contacts about, so a big cause for those contacts were things like my sewer is blocked.
Right.
You don't want to go on Facebook and Twitter and brag about those things, do you? And that for me is indicative of how people approach digital transformation. We gotta be there. We gotta do this thing. I think it's how they might now repeat the same mistake with developing AI machine learning things. So I think number one, they should acknowledge how emotions play a role. But the challenge with that is that there's not many data about emotions that organizations sit on. Having said that, I'm going to tell you three good examples of organizations that have succeeded with that. So maybe I should go into that. The first one, it's called Nice Enlightened AI. I have this AI tool that is sits with the call center, and the way I came about them was kind of like all roads lead to Rome. So I've read a number of their reports. I was at the same conferences with some of their guys. But what got me really into that was one of their clients, which was a big U.S. bank, to talk about their AI tool. And so I dig into that, and I wrote about that in the book. And here's the really interesting and funny part. So their AI tool was developed based on hundreds of thousands of call center interactions with agents, and they found, based on all these interactions, the AI tool analyzed and found the agent behaviors that leads to positive customer experience interactions. And many of those are actually identical with the research that I did, and that I found that basically things that empathizing to customers, showing that you're understanding, respect is one of those key emotions, actively listening to customers, all those things that came from our research. Their AI tool found that those are the key agent behaviors that drive value. And so their AI tool is really interesting, but what it's not doing is it's not an AI bot that takes over the conversation. It's actually a tool that helps agents to have a better interaction with customers. It can and also helps coaches, instead of randomly picking a phone conversation to listen. They have a sentiment score on each call based on, and again, maybe we should explain to customers where does this sentiment score comes. So just like you have communication, which is about what is said, there's actually the meta communication, as some academics call it, which is about how it is said. So essentially, the emotional sentiment of that interaction. So their AI tool can give this emotional sentiment score on each interaction, and can score it on a number of different variables. And so the coaches could go and pick up certain conversations and certain recordings and see what was the good or not so good thing about that, and provide the coaching to agents. So that's one really interesting thing. Another one, and this is really clever. So back in the days, there was an article that in HBR that the UK mortgage company had trained their agent to recognize if the customer is called thinker or actor, and like 4 different types, and they should adapt their behavior and the interaction towards that customer type. Well, now you have this smart behavioral routing that can route the call to an agent that the model predicts would be the best able to handle that interactions based on the customer's characteristics and history. Wow. And the agent type. So for example, Ryan, if you call this bank or so, they could route you to Colin, for example, instead of routing it to me or someone else.
That sounds like a disaster. But I understand the point you're making. Yeah, no, that's really cool, right? I mean,
very good.
What we were talking about earlier in terms of like training customers to behave in ways that are not necessarily intuitive to them, like that application suggests we might be able to route, certain customer types to people's natural kind of tendencies or gifts.
Yes.
Which sounds kind of amazing.
Yes.
They should employ that in dating apps. What are we doing?
Yeah, that would be good.
So
not that I've ever used them, of course.
Right.
They came a bit late for me, just as the time as I started this relationship. That's when the apps came.
Yeah. I'll make a suggestion that we change the subject.
Okay, I'm changing now the subject. So that was really interesting, and again, it shows how AI can be used to help train agents to evoke certain emotions, and again, how the AI found that emotions affect customer behavior. Now, the next one is really interesting, and again, I wrote about this company in my book. The company is called Signment. It maybe I might be mispronouncing it with my Bulgarian pronunciation. I think it's a startup. If my memory is correct, it's a Canadian startup. But what Colin said is the guys create a fusion between data, technology, and behavior science. This is maybe other than Amazon. This is one of those few organizations that actually do that. So the company, it's B2B. It's working with large organizations like banks, telecoms, and other organizations whose customers might be experiencing financial difficulties. But what tends to happen with most organizations is when the customer defects on a payment, that's when the organizations go and they typically what they do is they defer payments. But essentially, that's like kicking the can down the road. Now, what this company does is they're taking data from their client and also data from outside sources, and their AI machine learning algorithm can predict which customers are likely to fall in these difficulties and to defect on payments. And of course, what happens once a customer defects is like the call center, in particular, this is in COVID times, all organizations' contact centers are swarmed and things like that. And it's not a good customer experience for customers anyway. So with this machine learning algorithm, they can predict customers. And this is where your favorite part, guys, comes. They use behavior science to nudge customers towards different towards behaviors that they could change the structure of some payments, and this is self-service, so customers could choose different options. And they also use natural language processing, NLP, to kind of see the sentiment of customers' reactions to those nudges and stimuli, in how customers respond to those and how they write and stuff. And so they adapt. So what they send the customer next, their behavioral algorithm changes the nature of the response depending on customers' reaction to that nudge and stimuli. So I thought that's really interesting and empathetic way to use data and AI and behavioral science to create a more empathetic customer experience and also better customer experience, because it saves the customer relationship. It helps with retention. It doesn't drive cost to the contact center, and it's a better customer interaction. So I thought that is a good way to use AI and behavioral science in one go.
I like that. I'm struck, Colin, you and I, several months ago at this point, you had posted on LinkedIn asking for examples of bad customer experience, and we shared some of those stories on the podcast.
Yes.
One of the themes that arose during that conversation was this idea that a lot of firms are replacing humans with systems in
Yes.
terms of ways of handling things, and so it's not infrequent for you to run into these customer experience situations where the employee says, oh, I can't change it, like it's the system, and that's the way it is. Or sometimes you don't even engage with a person, and it's
Yes.
just the system, and you're kind of up against this wall. What Zhecho is pointing out in that last example there is the opportunity to potentially use AI to make these systems flexible, right? So sometimes a
Yes.
good customer experience happens when you run up against this inflexible system and there's a person there who can navigate it for you. There's an employee there or who can bend the rules in order to fit the situation. When you have a rigid system that's very efficient, but it can also result in some real bad customer experiences on the margins, where you're kind of ground up in the machinery of that bureaucracy. So
Yes.
just pointing to this opportunity of a system which is very efficient, but then a system that is potentially able to flex and bend based on a lot of specific characteristics of what's going on.
Yes,
And that
absolutely.
seems
And
like the best of both worlds potentially, which is very
yeah,
interesting.
and this is where I think that organizations are going back to your point originally, Ryan. I think a lot of organizations are just jumping on the bandwagon. And again, just bear with me whilst I explain this. So again, we did a podcast based on a book you've just read called The Myth of Experience. And we'll put a link to this in the show notes. And one of the things that it talked about in there is effectively is, do you have enough data to make a decision? Or do you think that you have enough data to make a decision? And it talked about the fact that there are kind learning environments and wicked learning environments. So a kind learning environment is where you have all of this information, or you have all the information that you can possibly get, and you can make a good decision. A wicked learning environment is where you think you have all the information that you've got, that there is, and you're making a decision on it. The issue being that in the wicked learning environment, you think you've got all the information, but you haven't got all the information. So where does this all tie together? Where this ties together for me is that I think that too many organizations are building AI systems in a wicked learning environment.
Yeah.
So they are building AI systems based upon what they think they understand about their customers. And if we go back to Broderick, they're building AI systems based upon their opinion. So again, go back to that quote I love from Broderick. It wasn't his quote. I can't remember whose quote it was, but he did mention it. That AI is just opinions written in code. Overall, the danger is that organizations are building their AI based solely around a rational experience.
Yeah.
Okay. And not taking into account the emotional side of things, and certainly not taking into account the behavioral side of things and the nudges that Zhecho is talking about, and therefore not able to do some of the things that Zhecho is talking about there in terms of the nudges and being able to be based upon your behavior, being able to be put through to certain types of people, personality and segmentation and everything else. And I think that's a real problem, because all it's going to do, it's going to what's the word I'm looking for? Perpetuate the current problem. And the current problem is that everybody looks at an experience just through the lens of this human being is an automaton that's going to make logical decisions. And everybody that listens to this podcast knows that we believe that that's not the case, and we actually make weird decisions. So I think the issue really is that these organizations need to embrace that emotional side and the behavioral science side to be able to fully understand what and why their customers are doing things. And my worry is that organizations aren't. It's as simple as that.
Yes.
Yeah. I think that
It's funny.
least...
It's coming up with a 10-minute explanation to say it's as simple as that after 10 minutes of talking straight. So.
It was more compelling though after you did. I think that there are at least two sources of bias that go underappreciated by people who are not well trained in artificial intelligence. So that, it seems like magic to people who don't understand kind of the mechanics of it. Like, oh, artificial intelligence just, it's going to organically turn into a human level intelligence all on its own. We don't need to worry about it. One of those sources of bias is the one that Broderick was talking about, which is kind of the way that the algorithm's set up. There's bias inherent in that because it's created by people, and so we're going to overemphasize certain things, even what's measured and what's optimized on. These rules tend to be built into the algorithms themselves. The other is the one that I think Colin was emphasizing just now, which is the sources of data that are used to feed the algorithm. Like we've all heard that story about an artificial intelligence bot that was created and then fed on Twitter data and then turned into a misogynist Nazi almost immediately. Why? There wasn't a problem with the algorithm. The algorithm was just designed to like suck in Twitter data and then figure out the rules of creating tweets. It was just fed on this toxic soup of the worst of humanity. And so the tweets it started creating were terrible and they had to kill the bot immediately. Less extreme examples of that happen when you feed your AI engine on data that doesn't include, in this case, emotions, or anything related to that. Like now we're getting a version of a bot that's optimized based on the data that it had, and it grew in that way, but it's missing a part of the story.
I mean, in essence, it goes back to that classic computer phrase, which is garbage in, garbage out. And if you've not put anything in there about emotions, then guess what? You're not going to get anything out about emotions, and you're going to go back to Zhecho's book, which is The Big Miss. You're going to miss out on a massive opportunity, basically.
Mm-hmm. There's actually so emotions aside, there's an interesting Aberdeen report that also compares the results of organizations that focus that use AI and machine learning, but it's mostly focused on saving costs. So kind of like creating these bots for finance and other interactions, which is fine if this is what you want to do and you can save costs. That's good. But that Aberdeen report also shows that organizations that achieve better results and grow faster and achieve a better ROI from that AI machine learning are actually focused on growth and deepening customer relationships. So not just on saving costs, but creating better relationship with customers or improving something in the sales or retention. And that is interesting. And as we discuss about the future and you talk about these bots, an interesting story that I read comes from Ogilvy Consulting, which in Vietnam created an AI avatar based on a celebrity. So kind of like the celebrity picture, but it's an AI. And that AI was able to sift through hundreds or millions of social media posts, like in Facebook and so on, and find the right places to interject with some comments and position the product. And they achieved some success with that, improve a little bit the market share and things like that in Vietnam. So that got me thinking. And the other thing that I saw the other day was someone posted a post saying like, "Are brand mascots dead?" And actually, I think with AI, and maybe something to interject as well. In my book, I write like, for example, organizations that don't have customer service or direct interactions with customers. One of the ways to form an emotional connection is through the brand, whether it's brand advertising focused on emotions or something about shared values. And I think, but connection there. I think, and we know the role of avatars, how they're easily recognizable. So think of like Aflac's duck or Michelin Man for Michelin. So this is what I thought, that the future of these brand interactions with customers at scale is by giving personality to these brand mascots. And this personality could engage with customers' emotions and based on shared values, or showing the values that the organization has, or creating this some sort of humorous or something emotional connection with customers. So I think that would be an interesting future where brands could use AI in this area and in this fashion.
Sure.
Yeah, I love that.
Sure. No, that's really good, Zhecho. So let me ask you a question as we bring this to a close. What, anybody listening to this going, yeah, this is totally right. What should people do other than go and buy your book, obviously?
Yes. Well, my goal for this year was really to find a partner that can help us to So we all believe that AI is the future. There's a phrase that I like: AI won't replace human managers, but human managers that use AI will replace those that don't use. So I've been working this year to find a partner that can help us go and guide some organizations as to what they could do with AI. And one of the things we came up with, it's called the Magic Wand Workshop, which is the first step of coming like, well, what can we do AI, and come up with certain things, and then rank order them, think about potential ROIs, and then the guys can do a roadmap of technology and other things that needs to be in place in order to actually do that. But I think it first starts with some blue sky thinking about, well, what data do we have, and what data do we need in the future to use AI and to create the experience that we want to create, and start to set start to get the pieces together. Maybe it won't happen today, but over time they should prepare for that.
Great, good, okay. And if people want to find out more about you, we'll obviously put a link for the book in the show notes. I guess people can go to Beyond Philosophy website as well. How else should they get hold of you, Zhecho?
Sure. Well, they could follow me on LinkedIn, Zhecho Dobrev, Zhecho, where I write a lot of articles about customer experience and lately about AI. They can also find me on the Beyond Philosophy website with the team members, and they can contact me through there. So lots of options.
Great, good. All right. Well, congratulations again on the book, mate. I hope your 15 minutes of fame continues to be half an hour.
Thanks for not forgetting about us, Zhecho.
Thank you.
We look forward to talking to you. We'll look forward to talking to our listeners next week. Okay. Cheers, everybody.
Okay. Thank you,
See ya.
guys. Bye-bye.